Have you ever heard of a type of curse, where just touching something that belonged to the dead means it will follow you for the rest of your life? There's a place deep in the forest near the Cambodian border where people say, anyone who enters that village without permission will bring something back with them, something invisible, but strong enough to wipe out your entire family within 49 days. I used to not believe it. I thought it was just a scare tactic, a ghost story meant to keep strangers away. That was until I came home, and every night, I heard crying under my bed. A shadow of a woman sat at the end of the bed, her long hair covering her face, silently watching me all night long. The story I'm about to tell is not for the faint of heart. But if you've clicked on this video, then stay until the end, because sometimes the scariest thing isn't in the story, but in you, the one listening to it. Have you ever felt like some trips, which you thought were just work, were actually destiny? Destiny that made you touch things you never should have touched. My name is Hung. I was 32 years old at the time, working in the gemstone trade. Cross-border trips were nothing new to me. Wherever there were cheap raw stones, I went, so long as they were beautiful and profitable. Then I heard about a newly discovered green stone mine in unknowingly, Cambodia. No Vietnamese traders had dared go near it. People said that place used to be a Khmer Rouge hideout, full of resentment and forbidden things no one had dared disturb. I didn't believe it. Money had hardened me, and I never believed in the spiritual world. So I went, alone. I trekked through forests and crossed rivers, carrying just a small bag and a few riel. I arrived in An Vang one rainy afternoon. The scenery was draped in a gloomy stillness. The village felt frozen in time. Moss-covered wooden houses with slanted roofs whispered with the wind, like voices murmuring just behind me. The locals spoke Khmer, which I didn't understand, but I could feel their eyes on me, strange and silent, as if they already knew something I didn't. I asked a child to guide me to the stone mine. He didn't speak, just pointed deeper into the forest and ran off without looking back. I was still confused when she appeared. A Khmer girl wearing a traditional purple dress, her long hair falling down, skin pale like someone who had been ill for a long time. Her eyes were empty. No joy, no sorrow, no life. She asked softly, "Are you Vietnamese?" I nodded. "You're looking for stones, right? I have some." I don't know why I trusted her. She led me to a small wooden house deep in the forest. Inside were stone statues hanging everywhere, every single one carved with the same face. Her face. She placed a bag of green stones in front of me, gorgeous, clear, flawless. The price was unbelievably cheap. I was about to pay when she said, "Take it, but leave this place within 3 days. If you don't say I didn't warn you." I thought it was just a scare tactic. I was wrong. That night, unable to find a guest house, I stayed in an old temple behind the mountain. It was abandoned, broken stone steps, wind chimes hanging crooked, dry leaves everywhere. I lay near the altar, using my jacket as a blanket. Around 2 in the morning, I was awakened by a soft laugh, right beside my ear. I opened my eyes and saw a shadow sitting at the end of the hallway, wearing purple, long hair, and most disturbingly, her feet weren't touching the ground. I jumped up. No one was there, but a strange chill still wrapped around my neck. The next morning, I left the village with the bag of stones, telling myself it was probably just a hallucination from exhaustion. I had no idea that at that very moment, a part of my soul was no longer mine. At first, everything seemed normal, but after 3 days, I started feeling tired, falling into deep sleep for no reason. A bruise formed on my wrist, round and dark, like I'd been tied up for days. Every night, I dreamed of returning to that wooden house. The girl sat at the stone table, whispering endlessly, "You didn't leave? You must pay the price." On the 7th day, blood started pouring from my nose without cause. Then I heard my name being called, from inside the walls. My mother, terrified, brought in a spiritual master. The moment he stepped into my room, he froze. set the offering bowl down on the floor, and said, "There's something in this house that doesn't belong to the living. There's a female spirit sitting under the bed." I laughed it off, but that night, I dreamed I was lying in a coffin. The person covering my face with the burial cloth was none other than that girl. That was the beginning of a nightmare that would last more than a year. And all of it, just because I touched stones that didn't belong to this world. Came back to Vietnam with the bag of stones from the Khmer girl. They were deep green gems, with faint white veins like mist. Each one was bright, clear, and strangely beautiful. My fellow gem traders couldn't stop praising them, and I happily thought, this trip is going to make me rich. But exactly 3 days after I got home, everything started to go wrong. I woke up with a splitting headache, like a hammer pounding my skull. I thought it was just from lack of sleep, so I ignored it, but on the 4th night, I started dreaming, the same dream over and over. I stood in the middle of that wooden house, and the girl named Srey sat on the floor, holding a stone in her hand, her eyes staring blankly at me. Every time I tried to turn away, my neck froze, I couldn't move. And every time I woke up, the bedsheet was soaked in sweat. For the first time in my life, I was afraid of a dream. It wasn't like a regular nightmare. It felt strangely real. And it happened every night, without fail. And that wasn't all. My body began to change. I lost my appetite. A chill ran through me from the inside. Every night, I felt like someone was lying next to me. I tried opening my eyes at midnight, nothing there. But I could hear a whisper right beside me. "Srey is still here. I haven't gone anywhere." I started seeing things. In the bathroom mirror, I saw myself standing there, but the reflection didn't move. It just stared at me, unblinking. My heart felt like it was being crushed. I smashed the mirror and collapsed to the floor. That was the first time I cried, out of fear. I locked the bag of stones in a cabinet, hoping it would stop everything. But things only got worse. I had nosebleeds every morning, dark circles under my eyes, and my chest felt heavy all the time. I went to the doctor. He said I was completely healthy. One night, I came home late. When I walked into my room, I saw the cabinet door wide open, even though I clearly remembered locking it. Stones were scattered all over the floor, and among them was a small bloody footprint. Right in the middle of the room. No one else was home. My mother was asleep in the next room. Door shut tight. I was truly terrified. For the first time in my life, I believed I had brought something back that didn't belong to this world. The next morning, I told everything to Ka, my best friend from college. He didn't laugh like I thought he would. Instead, his face went pale. He pulled me to a cafe down the street and whispered, "You have any idea what you touched? Cambodia isn't like Vietnam. Over there, black magic is real. Where did you get those stones?" I told him everything. When I mentioned An Vang, Ka went silent. Then he pulled out his phone and showed me a post on an old forum. It was about a Khmer girl named Srey who had once been accused by her village of being a witch. They said she used a type of binding love curse, a spell that forces a man to stay with her forever. But when she was discovered, they burned her alive right in front of the old temple. Her body was never recovered, and strangely, her grave was never found. People in the village whispered that her spirit still lingered in the stones she had once touched with her own blood during the ritual. A chill ran down my spine. I tried to reason. Maybe it's just the same name. People love to make up scary stories. But Ka shook his head. "The stones you brought back, they've been cursed. They're no longer merchandise, they're bait." That night, Ka took me to meet a spiritual master in Tay Ninh. I barely started explaining when the man stopped me and asked, without seeing my face, "Have you dreamed of a girl named Srey? Was she crying?" I froze. Then I nodded. He shook his head and backed away. "I can't help you. What's following you is no ordinary curse. It's a love-bound demon spirit, sealed with blood and a vow. If you can't sever that connection, no one can save you." I went home in despair. The next morning, I woke up to find a small piece of paper lying on my chest. No one else had the key to my room. On the paper, written in red ink, "I'm still here. Don't let anyone separate us. If you leave me, you will die." I screamed and collapsed to the floor. For the first time in my life, I felt like something was slowly consuming me from the inside out. I opened the stone bag again. Something had changed. Each stone now had a small black mark inside, like dried blood. I burned one of them to test, and it exploded like a firecracker, releasing a foul smell like burnt hair and blood. That's when I knew this wasn't a hallucination anymore. And if I didn't act fast, I wouldn't survive the next week. Don't remember exactly when I fell asleep. When I opened my eyes, the clock on my nightstand read exactly 3:13 a.m. The room was completely dark, but the window was wide open, as if someone had just come through it. The wind blew so strongly that the curtain kept fluttering non-stop. But I was on the 3rd floor. There's no way the wind could be that strong without something, or someone, causing it. I was about to get up to close the window when I froze in place. On the white wall opposite my bed, a streak of fresh red blood was dripping down. Not dry blood, fresh, wet blood. It was flowing from the ceiling, forming a long line, then dripping onto the floor. My mouth hung open, and it felt like my heart was being crushed by an invisible hand. Right then, I heard knocking at the door. 3 knocks. Slow, heavy, deliberate, as if someone was trying to send a message, not just asking to come in. I stepped out. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. But when I opened it, there was no one there. Only a small piece of purple fabric caught under my foot, gently fluttering in the breeze. I bent down to pick it up. It was from the same dress the Khmer girl had worn in An Vang. I knew then, she had come here. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't imagination. She had truly followed me back from that remote forest near the border. I called Ka, completely panicked. He came immediately that night, didn't ask much, and just said, "You have to come with me. I know someone who might be able to help." We drove for 2 hours into a forest near Tra Su, where an old Khmer man lived in isolation. No sign, no phone, no contact. People called him Chanda, a man who once guarded the ancient shrine that kept lost jars of cursed herbs from the Khmer Rouge era. When I told him everything, he asked only one question: "How long did you look into her eyes?" I was speechless. I remembered those eyes. Icy, empty, emotionless. And I had looked for too long. Chanda sighed and pulled out an old bronze mirror from his pocket, placing it in front of me. "Look into this. But remember, don't tremble." I lowered my face and looked. At first, it was just a blurry reflection. But slowly, I saw myself standing inside a wooden house, the same one. The Khmer girl was sitting with her back to me, brushing her hair. Long black strands fell to the floor. Then suddenly, she turned around, face to face. Her eyes stared straight through me. I couldn't breathe. My throat tightened. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. Just then, Chanda burned a small piece of paper, and thick, bitter smoke rose up. The mirror shattered instantly. He handed me a string of wooden beads, engraved with ancient Khmer script, and said, "You don't have much time left. If she continues draining your life energy for a few more nights, your soul will tear. She'll replace you." I left that place completely shaken. That night, I didn't dare sleep. I stared wide-eyed at the ceiling. At exactly 3:10 a.m., the lights went out. No one had touched the switch. No wind, no power outage. Then a soft humming began in the corner of the room. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew it was Khmer. A woman's voice, sweet, sorrowful. The refrigerator door in the kitchen swung open on its own. I gathered all my courage and walked toward it. But instead of food, inside was a face, pale white, eyes wide open, mouth frozen, her face. I stumbled back and fell to the floor. When I looked up, written in blood on the refrigerator door was a message: "Don't let anyone separate us. If you leave me one more time, I'll take you with me." I don't remember how loud I screamed. My mom called from the countryside, panicked by the sound of my voice. I just said, "Don't come home. Please go stay somewhere else for a few days." I couldn't let her get involved in this. I knew this had gone far beyond what any normal person could endure. I pulled out the stone bag, opened the box. The stones were no longer clear. Inside each one was a black mark, like a streak of dried blood deep within. I burned one to test it. The flame burst out in a sickly green color. The stench was so foul, like rotting blood and burnt hair. I vomited on the spot. A vision flashed in my mind, the image of her being tied up, blood dripping from her mouth, being burned alive in front of the temple gate, her eyes still wide open, staring straight at me. I understood. I hadn't just brought back stones. I had brought back a grudge, a restless spirit, bound by blood and a deadly vow. Now, she wasn't just a ghost. She was a part of me. From the moment I touched that first stone, my fate had already been sealed. Returned from Chanda's house with a wooden prayer bead bracelet and a small mirror wrapped tightly in black cloth. He warned me not to open the mirror on my own, not to let my eyes reflect in it at night, unless I wanted a spirit from the other side to pull me through. Everything in my house was unstable. The fridge, the gas stove, the fan, all kept turning on and off even though I had cut the power. I heard water running in the bathroom when no one was using it. On nights when I passed out from exhaustion, I would wake up with red marks on my wrists, like someone had been holding me tightly all night. I started coughing, long and hard, and every time I coughed, there was a metallic taste in my mouth. I knew the curse wasn't just draining me, it was living in my blood. That night, I dreamed I was standing in the forest of Unknowingly. All around me were whispers in a language I couldn't understand. A man in a monk's robe walked toward me, holding a staff engraved with ancient Khmer characters. He pointed to a crumbling stone shrine and said, "To live, you must call the name. To escape, you must endure pain." I woke up drenched in sweat. The image of the shrine was so vivid. I could remember every detail, the cracked red bricks. One side of the roof burned, and in the middle stood the headless statue of the goddess Aspara. One hand still raised mid-dance. I told Ka. He stared at me and said, "I once read about a shrine like that. In the That Sun region. The Khmer built it to seal the spirits of those who failed in dark magic rituals. There's a ceremony called naming, only used when the curse has sunk deep. And there's no other way." We searched for coordinates, asked a few friends who knew forest trails, and finally found it, deep in the hills near Tin Bien. Right by the border, where no one dares enter at night. We left before dawn. After crossing several hills, we arrived by noon at an old shrine hidden deep in a bamboo forest. The shrine was in ruins, covered in moss, with grass growing over the path. Strangely, as we got closer, the wind stopped. The whole forest held its breath. I stepped in, just like in my dream. The headless statue of the Aspara stood in the center, one hand frozen mid-dance. We scattered salt, placed white flowers, and lit incense. Chanda had taught me the naming ritual. I had to fetch a bowl of spring water from beneath the shrine, drop a few drops of my own blood into it, then call the spirit's name 3 times. I took out a small knife, pricked my finger. The blood dropped into the water, turning it a pale pink. I held the bowl, knelt before the statue, and for the first time, clearly spoke her name. "Srey, if you're still here, show yourself. Tell me what you want." The wind began to stir. The incense went out. The shrine door trembled, as if someone was gently pushing from the outside. I spoke the name again. Still no reply. But on the wall, a bloody handprint slowly appeared, dragging downward to the floor. I swallowed my fear and spoke a third time. "Srey, I'm here. If you need me to do something to end this curse, say it." That's when I heard the singing. Soft, feminine, in Khmer, mournful and haunting. I turned. Behind the Aspara statue, a faint image appeared on the wall. A woman standing in flames. Her hair burning, her eyes wide open, staring at me. I didn't dare move. A tingling numbness ran down my spine. Then suddenly, a coldness poured over me like water had been dumped directly on my head. I heard a whisper right beside my ear. "I don't want to hurt you, but I'm trapped, there's no way out." I looked into the bowl. The water began to bubble. A clear image formed inside, the wooden house in Unknowingly. The purple cloth hanging on the door. Inside was a flickering oil lamp. And she, Shrey, was sitting at the table, brushing her hair, her eyes staring straight at me through the surface of the water. Ka yanked my arm hard. "Let's go. The ritual is done. Staying any longer is dangerous." I stood up, my limbs numb. As we stepped out of the shrine, I looked back and saw it clearly, right at the doorway. A white figure floated out, standing there watching me, long hair covering her face. The wind blew fiercely, leaves scattering everywhere, but I heard nothing, only the fading song, growing distant, like someone singing a farewell from another world. We returned in silence. Inside me, part of the weight had lifted, but another part felt heavier. I knew this ritual didn't break the curse. I had only called her name, but at least I had confirmed she truly existed. She was still there, and she was waiting for me to do something for her. That night, I passed out from sheer exhaustion. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't have a nightmare. But when I woke up, under my pillow was a long strand of hair, tied with a red thread. My spine turned cold. I grabbed it, ready to throw it away. But then, I froze. Beneath the strand was a faint sentence, written in Vietnamese. "Thank you. I'm still waiting." Woke up the next morning with a mild headache, but my mind felt strangely at ease. Maybe it was because last night, I didn't have a nightmare. No whispers, no blood smeared on the walls, no bloody handprints appearing in the dark. Everything was so quiet, it made me question whether this peace was real. But then, I remembered the long strand of hair tied with red thread under my pillow. It was still there, soft, cold, and carrying the scent of ashes. I picked it up, intending to burn it, but the flame of the lighter was snuffed out the moment I tried to light it. As if someone had blown on it. Outside, a light rain was falling, soft but persistent. The rain reminded me of the way Shrey had looked at me in the water that night. No hatred, no blame, just something distant, as if she'd been waiting a long time for someone to come back. I looked out the window, and for the first time, I felt a clarity I hadn't had before. I had to return to Unknowingly. Not because of the curse, not because I was haunted, but because I needed to understand who she really was, and why she chose me to be bound to. I didn't tell Ka, I didn't tell my mother. I simply packed a few clothes, grabbed a bag of cash, some protective charms, and left before sunrise. This trip wasn't like the last. I wasn't eager. I wasn't curious. I was no longer the optimistic gem trader chasing after profit. I was a man returning to the place where he'd been marked. I crossed the border under the excuse of tourism. No one paid attention. The Cambodian border guard glanced at my passport, then waved me through. The road to the old village near Unknowingly was no longer unfamiliar. I remembered every curve, every patch of wild grass on the roadside, even the old wooden sign with Khmer writing that I hadn't understood the last time. Now I did. It was a warning. I arrived at the village in the early afternoon. The village was empty, not a soul in sight. No crowing roosters, no barking dogs, no one walking outside. I passed by the old drink stall where an old man had once looked at me strangely. It was now covered in dust. The cups were still there, but the owner had vanished. I walked deeper into the forest. The path leading to Shrey's wooden house was still there. The grass had grown tall, past my knees, but the trail had not disappeared. When I arrived, the house was still standing. The thatched roof was crumbling. The walls were peeling, but strangely, the inside was spotless. No dust, no cobwebs, as if someone still lived there. I stepped inside. On the table was the same small round mirror with the old brass frame. Beside it was a dried teacup. And a photograph. I picked it up. It was her, Srey, but not in the ghostly form I had always seen. She was a young woman with a gentle smile, dressed in white, her hair falling softly around her face. On the back of the photo, written in ink, were the words, Srey 1982. I was stunned. If she was around 20 then, she would be over 60 now. But the face I saw was still the young woman I remembered. I turned and looked at the wooden wall opposite me. My heart tightened. Someone had scratched a message into the wood with their fingernail. A line in Khmer I had memorized after weeks of studying Ka's old books. I'll wait for you, beneath the banyan tree behind the old temple. I left the house, followed the familiar path toward the abandoned temple where I had once spent a night. The banyan tree behind the temple was massive, its roots twisting across the ground, its trunk so wide it would take 3 people to wrap their arms around it. And right beneath that tree was a small mound of earth, covered in wildflowers, with an old comb stuck into the ground at an angle. I don't know why I did it, but I knelt down. I prayed. No rituals, no spells, just words from my heart. I said I had taken the stones. I apologized for touching what wasn't mine. I told her I had seen her in dreams, in the water, in the singing, in the cold nights, and I asked, Srey, what do you want me to do? The wind picked up, the leaves curled and danced. The sky darkened even though it was still early. And then, I heard footsteps, not someone approaching, but someone walking slowly in circles around me. Light, very light. I didn't dare lift my head, but I felt it clearly, a hand placed on my shoulder. Not cold, not heavy, just a gentle touch, like a goodbye. I turned around. No one was there, but, on the ground, a line of small, round, wet footprints led away into the deep forest. I stood up, and for the first time, I smiled. I knew she had left. No more curse, no more singing, no more headaches, nosebleeds, or nightmares. Just a wooden house, an old photograph, and a quiet emptiness I couldn't name. I went home, truly home, but deep inside, one question still lingered, unanswered. Why me? Out of all the people who had passed through that land, why did she choose me? I don't have the answer. And maybe, I never will. Thought everything had ended after I returned to Unknowingly. After I knelt beneath the ancient banyan tree and felt that final touch. I believed she had let go. That the cursed spirit had dissolved. That everything haunting me was now just a fading memory. But I was wrong. For many nights, I had no nightmares. No more knocking at 3 a.m. No blood dripping from the walls or handprints appearing on mirrors. I returned to work, completed a few small gemstone deals, and life slowly returned to normal as if nothing had ever happened. Until one weekend afternoon, while I was counting inventory in the warehouse, I heard a voice calling from the bedroom. A woman's voice, in Vietnamese. But strange, soft, slow, and drawn out. Hung, you're home already. I froze. I was alone in the house. I walked into the room, checked every corner. No one was there. I stood still for a while, my heart pounding. That wasn't a hallucination. I had heard it clearly. That voice felt disturbingly familiar. Intimate, too close. I pulled out my phone and checked the security cameras inside the house. It had shown only me since early afternoon. No one came in, no one left. A few days later, while I was sorting through old paperwork, I heard the voice again. This time it didn't call my name. It whispered, close to my left ear. You forgot me so quickly. I froze. The air around me felt frozen in place. I touched my ear. It was warm, wet. There was blood. I rushed to the bathroom, looked in the mirror. A thin line of red was trickling from my left ear. I couldn't stay calm anymore. I called Chanda. The line wouldn't connect. I messaged Ka for help. An hour later, he showed up. I hadn't even finished explaining when he asked, "Did you hear her voice?" I nodded. His face turned pale. He said, "I just read something new. There's a type of curse called echo binding, when the curse sinks deep into your blood and binds through intense emotion. It doesn't leave, it stays inside the voice. It speaks using the mouth of the one possessed. Or, it speaks to others using the victim's own voice. I didn't fully understand, but that night, I understood more than anyone ever could. While eating dinner, I turned on the TV, trying to drown out the terrifying silence. But amid the soft music, I heard giggling, a girl's giggle, like a 17 or 18-year-old. Pure, but haunting. I turned off the TV and stood still in the room. Then, I heard footsteps walking above me. Not a rat, not a cat, it was the sound of heels. Stepping, clear and deliberate. I gathered my courage and climbed to the rooftop. Nothing, but when I came back down, the bedroom door had opened on its own. And on the wall, someone had written in white chalk, "You once said, if I were still alive, you'd choose me." I stood there, frozen. That sentence, I had never spoken out loud. But it was true, I had thought it. In one fleeting moment during that first dream, I had thought if she were still alive, if things had been different, maybe I would have stayed. Now I understood, she had read my mind. The curse was no longer outside me. It was inside, in my blood, in my thoughts, in my subconscious, and now, in my voice. That night, I dreamed I was standing in front of a large mirror. But the reflection wasn't me, it was her. Srey, wearing the same purple dress from before. She no longer looked ghostly. Her eyes weren't empty. She was smiling and speaking in my voice. I never left. I just moved inside you. I jolted awake, drenched in sweat, but I didn't dare sit up, because I heard myself softly singing. My mouth moved on its own, humming a Khmer lullaby. I covered my mouth. I bit my tongue to stay conscious. I couldn't let her take over my voice. But what horrified me more was this. When I opened my phone, the last message I had sent to my mother, written in Vietnamese, had turned into Khmer script. I hadn't typed that. I've never studied it, but my hand had done it unconsciously. I locked my house. I avoided all contact. I was afraid I'd say something I didn't mean. Afraid I'd hurt someone I loved with a voice that no longer belonged to me. I feared that one day, someone would go to my mother and say, "That's not Hung anymore." And then, I heard the final voice of that day. Not beside my ear, not in my head, but from deep inside my own throat. Speaking without my will. "You belong to me now. Stop resisting." And I understood. The naming ritual wasn't enough. The banyan tree was only the beginning. She hadn't left because she hadn't been freed. I wasn't just a witness. I was the vessel. And that spirit was growing inside me with every passing night. Every breath, every whisper in the dark, began to feel a burning sensation in my throat every morning. Not due to illness, but because each night, I was unconsciously murmuring Khmer incantations whose meanings I didn't understand. I placed a recorder beside my bed and captured over 20 minutes of whispers, some soft, some loud, occasionally erupting like someone screaming right next to my ear. One phrase repeated 7 times, "If you sever me, you must bleed." I shared the recording with Ka. His face turned pale, speechless for several minutes, before he called a man named Tin, a shaman who had studied ancient Khmer spirits in the Seven Mountains region. Tin, known for his blunt demeanor, didn't laugh or question me upon hearing my story. He simply said, "If it's a voiced spirit residing in your speech, the only remedy is a severance ritual. But this ritual requires blood, not just any blood, but the kind that severs spiritual bonds." Though I didn't fully grasp his words, I agreed. I was exhausted, tormented by sleepless nights and the feeling of losing myself. I was willing to do anything to be free. Tin scheduled the ritual for the night of the 14th lunar day, when the moon is nearly full but not yet bright enough for the spirit to hide. The location was a small shrine near Mount Cam, once used by ancient Khmer to perform sacrificial magic. I arrived early, instructed not to speak, think, or bring anything associated with Srey. But I had already broken that rule. In my pocket was a bronze necklace I had inadvertently picked up from Sray's wooden house during my return to An Long Vang. I didn't intend to keep it, but my hand refused to let it go. As the ritual commenced, I was led into a circle made of salt, chicken blood, and thick incense smoke. Tin chanted in a language unfamiliar to me, not Khmer, not Vietnamese, but something ancient and lost to time. I closed my eyes, striving for silence, but my head throbbed as if someone were drilling into my temples. Then, I felt myself floating. Darkness enveloped me. I could no longer hear the wind or feel the ground beneath me. I saw myself standing between two facing mirrors, each reflecting me with a smile that wasn't mine. Tin shouted, "The spirit has manifested. Prepare to extract." My body trembled as if thousands of needles pierced my spine. A shriek echoed, reminiscent of a woman being burned alive. I collapsed, and from my mouth emerged a female voice screaming, "Don't separate me. You promised. You looked at me like a lover. You chose me." Blood trickled from my nose and ears. Tin pressed on, using a small blade to cut a diagonal line across my chest near my heart. The pain was intense, but not as excruciating as the screams in my mind. She was wailing, struggling, writhing as if being torn from her sanctuary. When the first drop of blood fell into the spirit bowl, white smoke rose, gradually turning deep red. A face appeared on the water's surface, blurred, contorted, eyes filled with resentment. But then, the face softened, as if accepting, understanding, it was time. Tin took a terracotta Aspara statue, wrapped it in white cloth soaked with my blood, and chanted. The statue trembled slightly. After the third chant, a small explosion occurred. The statue cracked and turned to dust. An eerie silence followed, no wind, no shrieks, no voices from my throat. I opened my eyes. It was still night, but the moon shone brightly, gentle as water. Tin gazed at me for a long time before saying, "It's done. She's gone, but there's something you should know. Her spirit never intended to harm you. She was just lonely for too long." I bowed my head, my heart heavy, not from blood loss, but from understanding. Some spirits don't choose to become curses. They're trapped between worlds, unnamed, unacknowledged, forgotten. When someone inadvertently meets their gaze, they cling, like a drowning person grasping a straw. She didn't need my love. She just needed to be remembered. I returned home, the cut on my chest still aching, but my heart felt lighter. I slept through the night, dreamless, undisturbed. For the first time in months, I heard no other voices. I don't know if the curse has truly lifted, but I know I'm no longer a vessel. She's gone. Yet, whenever rain is imminent, I find myself sitting quietly on the porch, listening to the wind, awaiting a whispered greeting that no longer comes. Returned to my daily life after the ritual to remove the charm. Feeling lighter, my mind clearer, my voice no longer echoing unfamiliar sounds. I slept soundly through the night, waking up without headaches or the sensation of someone sitting by my bed. I began to believe that everything had ended, that I had truly stepped out of the darkness of a strange bond stretching from some unnamed past life. I cleaned my house, discarding everything related to her, from the broken stone to the old photo. Even the purple scarf I once hid in the drawer was burned. The flames blazed brightly, but as the ashes scattered, I felt an odd emptiness. The following days passed peacefully. I resumed my gemstone trading, placing orders from Laos and Thailand, avoiding Cambodia entirely. I kept my distance from shadowy lands and mystical tales, declining all offers to buy stones from ancient mines. I knew that if I touched something not belonging to the living world again, I might not have a chance to return. But life isn't that simple. Everything started again on a very ordinary day. I was sitting at my usual street corner cafe when a young woman approached. Petite, wearing a white shirt and a long purple skirt. She carried a strange scent, not strong, not familiar, but it made me pause. Not because of the smell, but because of her gaze. She looked at me as if she'd known me for a long time. She smiled gently and asked, "Are you hung?" I nodded instinctively, though I had no idea how she knew my name. "I saw you in a dream," she said, her voice steady, neither high nor low, but it made my heart skip a beat. She pulled out a purple handkerchief from her bag and showed it to me. "I found this in the forest, near an abandoned wooden house by the border. Inside the scarf was a piece of paper with your name on it." I took the scarf, my fingers trembling, though I tried to appear calm. It was that scarf, the one I had burned. The paper inside bore my handwriting. I remembered clearly. I had hastily written a few lines of apology, wrapped it up, and threw it into the fire along with the photo. I even watched it turn to ashes. But now, it lay neatly in the hands of a stranger. In broad daylight, in the city, in a cafe where no one seemed to notice. I asked, "Who are you?" She just smiled and said something that left me speechless. "You sent her off. But are you sure you've repaid all your debts?" I stood up but couldn't move. Not because my legs were weak, but because I was scared. I feared her, not Srey, but the girl sitting before me, looking so ordinary yet speaking words as if poured from a realm without light. I asked again, my voice hoarse, "Who are you?" She didn't answer, just stood up and walked away. But before disappearing around the corner, she turned back, looked straight at me, and said slowly, "The dead don't need love, just to be remembered." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in my room, turned off all the lights, didn't close my eyes, just stared at the ceiling, waiting for something unnamed, and then it came. Around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps from the living room, slow and very light, then the sound of hands scratching the wall, then the wind blowing through the tightly closed window, and finally, a soft chuckle from behind the curtain. I didn't get up, didn't scream, didn't run, I just lay there, breathing evenly, and said in my mind, "If it's you, then come here." Nothing happened afterward. No white shadow, no blood, no burnt smell, no voice echoing from my throat. Just a piece of paper placed on my chest the next morning. On it was written, "You thought removing the charm was enough? There's still your promise. You still owe me a death anniversary." I sat in silence, not understanding, not believing, not daring to believe. I had sent her off, removed the charm, shed blood, and slept peacefully for nearly a month. But perhaps I had forgotten something. She didn't need a farewell ritual. She needed a place to return to. Someone like me, who accidentally pulled her from the afterlife. Now, I am the one who must bring her back. But how? How do you hold a death anniversary for someone without a body? Without a date of death? Without a grave? Without family? Without a hometown? She only has me, the one who once looked into her eyes. And if I don't do it, I fear that next time, it won't just be a piece of paper placed on my chest. Never believed that a memorial day could be held for someone who was never buried. Had no tombstone, no ashes, not even a family line to light incense for. But after that night when the note was placed on my chest, all my beliefs seemed to collapse. There was no longer a boundary between what is called superstition and reality. Between the living world and the afterlife, I realized that she, Srey, was still somewhere around me. Not appearing in form, not possessing anyone, but persistently present in the most gentle and haunting way. Reminders. I woke up that morning with a decision in my mind. No one urged me, no one suggested it, but it was as clear as a command spoken from my very flesh and blood. I had to hold a memorial day for her. Even though I didn't know the date of her death, her birthday, or have any identification documents, I chose the day I returned from An Long Vang, the day I set foot back on Vietnamese soil and thought I had shed all misfortunes. I took a blank sheet of paper, wrote exactly 2 words, Srey, First Memorial, and stuck it on the small altar I had set up in my room. Where once there were lucky feng shui items, now stood 3 incense sticks, a bowl of white rice, a glass of water, and a portrait I drew from memory, an imperfect face but with eyes so eerily similar. I didn't invite anyone, nor did I tell Ka. I just sat alone in that room from afternoon until evening, saying nothing, doing nothing, only lighting incense 3 times, igniting the flame 3 times, and each time, I closed my eyes, thinking of the strange moments I had lived with her, even though no one else saw, even though I was the only one who bore it all. Around midnight, when the incense had burned out, I leaned against the wall, the room's light gradually dimming, not because the bulb was broken, but because a kind of invisible mist began to spread from the corner of the room. Like that night at the old shrine, I wasn't afraid, but my body grew colder. From my feet up my spine, then my wrists, then my heart, then I heard that sound, the sobbing under the bed, not loud, not intense, but enough to shatter every silence. I didn't look down, I just asked, "Is there anything you haven't said?" The crying stopped. A whisper arose, like wind through banana leaves. Very soft. "I want my real name, on a tombstone." I was silent. For the first time, I understood that what she needed wasn't a grand ceremony, not a lavish offering, and certainly not pity. She just needed recognition, to be acknowledged as someone who once existed, to be remembered as a person, with a name, an age, a place to be called upon when the seasons change. I stood up, searched through the old papers I had brought back from the border, flipped through each note, each line in my notebook, until I found a line written in faded pencil. Srey Mom, born 1963. Svay village. I didn't know why I still kept it. Perhaps because I didn't have the courage to throw it away. And today, I understood that this was all she left to prove she once lived. The next day, I went to a stone engraving shop on the outskirts. I asked them to carve a small tombstone, made of white quartz, not large, not elaborate, just a few lines. Srey Mom 1963, and below, a smaller line. Someone who was once looked upon with love. When the craftsman asked, "What is the date of death?" I just shook my head. "No one knows." "This is enough." I brought the tombstone back, placed it in a corner of the cemetery behind the ancestral temple, where there was an unused plot, unvisited by anyone. I set up a small bamboo frame covered with light purple fabric, like the color of the dress she often wore in my dreams. I lit incense, this time without praying, just stood silently, and I clearly felt a gentle breeze brushing against my wrist. Very light, very delicate, like a finger touching briefly and then disappearing. That night, I no longer heard crying, no more knocking at the door, no more whispers, but strangely, the dream returned. I dreamed I was standing in a field full of white reeds. In the distance was the silhouette of a girl walking against the wind. I ran after her but couldn't catch up. When I got close, she turned around and smiled, the first smile I saw without sorrow. Then she turned away, stepped into the white mist, without looking back, but left behind a sentence carried by the wind. "I'm at peace now. But please don't forget me." I woke up, feeling lighthearted, looking out the window. It was still dark. I lit a cigarette, looked toward the wind, and I knew, no matter how many years pass, no matter who else I love, how I live, or how I age, somewhere in my heart, I will always keep a small corner. Enough for a name, a soul that once quietly passed through my life, leaving nothing but midnight tears and a tombstone without a date of death. Lived more peacefully after setting up the memorial stone for Srey. I no longer dreamed of her, no longer heard crying beneath the bed or knocking at midnight. Life seemed to return to its old rhythm. I even got used to her absence in the small moments of my daily life. But I still kept the habit of lighting incense every morning, not for my ancestors, but for someone who was never blood-related, never truly known, never once held my hand, just a wandering soul I had accidentally brought back. The first few months after placing the stone, everything stayed calm. I even believed I had repaid my karmic debt, had righted a wrong from a past life. But everything began to change on one particular afternoon when I stopped by a roadside stall near the Tay Ninh border to buy water. The vendor was an old Khmer woman with white hair and cloudy eyes. When she saw me, she shuddered and pulled her hand back, refusing to sell me anything. She mumbled in a language I didn't understand, but I clearly heard one word, Nik Ta, a word Ka once told me meant shadow bearer in ancient Khmer. I was about to leave when the old woman spoke again, her Vietnamese thick with an accent. You think you only brought one back? I froze. She slowly stepped behind her stall and pulled from her basket a ragged piece of cloth. Inside it was a tarnished silver ring, its face etched with a strange symbol, not Khmer, not Latin, but eerily familiar. I had seen it before, faintly carved into a piece of quartz I brought back from my first trip. The woman said, the first was the girl. But she didn't come alone. In that stone, there was someone else. A soul with no name, no face, no voice, but he's followed you since that day. I took the ring with trembling hands, a cold chill racing down my spine. I asked, how do you know? She didn't answer, only said, he doesn't appear in dreams. He doesn't cry, he doesn't laugh, he just waited for the first one to leave, so he could take her place. I returned home suffocating with unease. The room I knew so well. The same walls, the same small altar still glowing with incense smoke. Somehow, the light in the room felt different, more golden, heavier, and no longer warm, as if veiled in something unseen. I went to wash my face, and when I looked up, the mirror behind me reflected a black shadow, half a head taller than me, standing motionless. I turned around, nothing, looked back, still there. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the center of the room with a dim light on, quietly admitting to myself, someone else had arrived. No wailing, no groaning, no dreams, just watching, waiting. In a half-sleep near dawn, I dreamed I was walking through a deep stone house. Hundreds of nailed hands lined the walls, pierced with thorns, not bleeding, but all pointing toward a single massive stone door, barely ajar. I stepped closer. Every step made my heart pound louder. When I placed my hand on the door, it creaked open, and inside stood a man in a black cloak. Shoulder-length hair, his face covered by blood-red cloth. He didn't speak, he simply handed me a sheet of human skin, with one sentence written in blood, I've waited for my turn. I screamed and woke up drenched in sweat. But the horror wasn't the dream, it was that I was really holding that piece of skin. Not paper, not fake, real flesh, and the bloodied sentence was still wet. I rushed to see Mr. Tin that very morning. As soon as he saw it, he stepped back in shock and muttered, "It's Tram Guy, silent magic, not fueled by love or grief, but feeding on souls in silence." I asked if it could be removed. He shook his head. No name, no form, no past. You can't drive it out, because you don't know who it is. There's only one way: trace the origin of the first stone. The one you never inspected. If it contains a curse forged from warriors' blood, then you're not just haunted. You're the replacement. I spent days digging through my old stockpile, inspecting every stone I had brought back from the border. There was one I had never noticed, solid black, heavier than usual, not shimmering. Under magnification, I saw inside it a hunched figure, head in hands, surrounded by dried blood patterns. I knew then, I had opened the second door. Srey had a face. This one was a nameless shadow, and I had unknowingly released it. The story I thought had ended turned out to be the beginning of a deeper, darker spiral. And this time, it wasn't love that haunted me, it was the blood that touched an ancient sin, where the dead seek no justice, only a body to silently live on through. Thank you for staying with me through the chilling and emotional journey of the series. The Khmer Hex, Curse Beneath the Ancient Pagoda. What began as a harmless stone ended up pulling the main character into a vortex of souls, grudges, and karmic debt with no clear escape. And in the end, just when he thought it was over, he realized each step into the world of dark magic only opens the door to the next shadow waiting. If this story captivated you, don't forget to like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more long-form horror tales, deep, emotional, and steeped in spiritual folklore.